Welcome to another week of Stool Perspective, where two reasonably ill-informed people give you the booze news of the week. I'm Mike Morgan, and you, sir, are...
Brett Coleman Baker.
Damn pleased to meet you. What happened this week, Brett?
Well, it's been a pretty good week, all things considered.
Yeah.
Craft Brewers Conference just wrapped up, which we talked a little bit about last week. That is the biggest brewers conference of the year. It's really designed more for brewery owners, to meet with other brewery owners and brewers to learn a little bit, but it's not so much based on the science of brewing as it is about the politicking of brewing.
The industry.
Yeah.
And also the drinking.
If
anybody wonders why Brett looks like he's on a several-day hangover, it's because he's on a several-day hangover.
That is true. No beer conference is complete without copious amounts of alcohol and late nights and early mornings. It's just the way it goes. It's a job hazard, as you well know.
Yeah, right.
We'll get into some of what happened with CBC a little bit later. I wanted to start off with something a little bit lighter. Now, as we all know, everybody loves fruit. Fruit is gaining in popularity. Sure. Weirdly enough, cider doesn't do that well in this country, probably because it's all a bunch of sweet and most of it's not very good unless you're into the sugary thing. But I thought
Americans are.
They do love it. It's a global
their
issue.
Pastry stouts and
That's true. We do love our sugar. But Angry Orchard is launching a new product. It's a rosé cider made with blueberries. So I don't really have a point to that. I just thought it was interesting that they are starting to dip their toes more into these non-traditional aspects of using fruit, something that we have long championed.
Right. Urban Artifact leading the way.
Yeah, so this wasn't supposed to be an Urban Artifact commercial at the beginning, but I guess that's kind of the whole point. So, in other news...
Copying is the highest form of flattery, Brett.
Well, I like to think so as well. In other news, our producer, Adam, who's been around since the dinosaurs, has seen returnable beer bottles come and go. Mm-hmm. But they're actually returning again. Have you seen much with the returnable beer bottle gaining momentum at all in your daily drinking life?
I was unaware of it entirely. I remember returnable beer bottles from when I started drinking, as a teenager. And, they were already out of favor, but there were a couple places that still did it. Hootapole still had returnable bottles. And people hated it. And when I grew up, it was more a soda thing. Like, you would return your Pepsi and your Coke bottles. And it's a very environmentally conscious thing to do. But people hate it.
It's because of the extra work, because you got to wash the bottles, you got to collect the bottles, you got to return the bottles. And all for what? Do you get some money back?
Take them back, yeah. And you get charged a deposit up front. And you basically get the deposit back when you return it. And the American consumer is just too lazy to do that. They'll say that it's a good idea on paper, but when it comes to practice, people don't want to do it. So is it working anywhere?
It looks like they're pushing more for it in the Pacific Northwest, Oregon area, Washington.
Portland. It'll work in Portland.
Yeah, the weird shit works in Portland. This was a good way for kids to make a little bit of spending money back in the day, too.
Right.
It's my understanding. Mm-hmm. Collect some bottles, get some deposits, which sounds like stealing now with some extra steps.
Right.
But, whatever works for these kids.
Well, recycling-ish.
I kind of think that
if you stole a case of Hootapole, you could return it and get money for it.
And then you get the liquor inside, too.
I'm just saying theoretically, perhaps that happened. I wouldn't be proud if it did, but it might have happened once.
What I also think is interesting about this is that I think the bottle itself is due for a comeback. Everything's cans now. Can. You can't get beer that's not in cans anymore. It's hard to even find companies that have long done bottles to still do bottles.
Right.
I think the bottle itself, returnable or not, is primed for a comeback.
We know the pros of the can, and they're infinite, and a can makes a lot more sense than a bottle. The same way a twist top makes more sense on a bottle of wine than a cork does.
That's true.
But who doesn't prefer to drink out of a bottle and cork a bottle of wine before you drink it?
Yeah, and what's crazy is that just like the screw cap in the cork example, it's better for the wine to be with a screw cap. Right. The seal's tighter, the seal's better. It's got the plastic little liner in it that absorbs oxygen, so it's got an oxygen scavenging barrier. All these things are better than a cork. But what feels better?
Popping that cork out, man.
And there's something about popping the pry top, because it's got to be a pry top. The screw top, get out of here.
There's something about that bottle a little bit.
You hold the
Yeah.
bottle in your hand, it feels better than a can.
Yeah.
It's just, everything about it's nice.
Yes.
They clang around. There's just some romantic stuff with the bottle. I think it's ready for a comeback, but I think it's going to be years. And something people don't talk about with the cans that's interesting is that they have a plastic liner on the inside. Every can. And no one really talks about that, but everyone talks about microplastics and how they're bad for you. And, I mean, obviously they are, and they're in everything. But the fact that every single can has microplastics in it is kind of insane that people don't care about that more. But
I didn't know that.
yeah, it ain't great.
There's also aluminum shortages, correct? And we're getting in making aluminum. It's very recyclable, but making it is terrible for the environment.
Yeah, they talk about it's infinitely recyclable, but they don't talk about mining it and the disaster that it is to mine aluminum ore. And then all the smelting and all the energy required. So once you have it, sure, it's great. But getting it in the first place is difficult. And interestingly enough, there's not really a shortage right now, and there never really was. There's a whole big cartel with aluminum. Ball, who does $3.5 billion a quarter in sales, who makes about $400 million in profit a quarter. They're complaining about brewers that need to push more cans, and they need to have this big push behind cans, or they're going to start shutting down plants so they can drive pricing back up because can prices have started to fall, which is great. But they would rather, act like OPEC than, let the free market do its thing.
Does the aluminum cartel ever cut off somebody's head and send it to bottle manufacturers in Ohio?
I haven't pissed anyone off that much yet at Ball, but I guess we can find out how ruthless they can get.
It works well for, the Mexican cartels.
Well, on that note, speaking of cartels, the Brewers Association...
Don't do it. Don't cut someone's head off and send it in a box just to make a point. It's just not worth it. Wrong.
I didn't think we would need to spell that out, but I guess we are at a bar and we are having drinks, so you never know. The BA had two things from CBC. The BA is the Brewers Association, CBC, the Craft Brewers Conference. There's two things they said. One was the chief economist, Dr. Bart Watson, very smart man. He said that beer's flat.
Chief economist for the Brewers Association?
Yes.
All right.
He's actually also in the Hall of Fame for, what's the Ultimate Frisbee? Interestingly enough.
Okay.
Neither here nor there, but he said that craft beer is flat to down, and it's going to remain flat to down for the foreseeable future. Gone are the days of growth. So we will not see growth again for quite some time.
Is that due to inflation, or is it due to the fact there's over 9,000 breweries, or a combination of those things, or the fact that people pushing your theory don't really like beer?
Yes. It's all of those things.
Great.
We've kind of just naturally hit a plateau for craft beer, and we're kind of where it's going to be for a little while. Much like the restaurant industry.
Could you bring me a seltzer?
Preferably one with vodka in it.
Like the restaurant industry itself, has it plateaued as well?
The restaurant industry has long been pretty stable.
Yeah.
The amount of restaurants in America has largely been the amount of restaurants in America. There's lots of closings, there's lots of openings. Yeah. But craft beer for the longest time didn't hit that model, but was long suspected it would. We're approaching that more now.
So we may have hit the craft beer peak somewhere around about 2018 or so, which is I believe 2018 was the first year where craft beer was taking market share away from the huge breweries. And it was just a little bit, but it was taking market share away. And then that trend may have continued in 2019. Then we had COVID, and then everything got completely weird. So perhaps the high water mark of craft beer has come and gone.
The most recent high water mark has come and gone, 100%. Which is really funny that then the CEO and president of the Brewers Association, who's nothing more than a clown that makes too much money, he says that our best days for craft beer are still ahead of us. I don't know what days he's talking about. Right. It's probably 10 years in the future, but our best days are way in the future if he thinks they're still ahead.
Optimism always works.
My favorite thing to do is not educate people on the coming issues and just let them suffer and close and fail left and right. Because why would you protect the members that you exist to protect when you can just watch them get caught
Yeah,
off
you can
guard.
tell them everything is great. Everything is fine for craft beer. You should open a brewery yourself, actually.
Now's never been a better time.
I was reading a story a while back, and I don't remember the details of this, so nobody sue me if I screw this up. But there was somebody higher up in the Anheuser-Busch family. I think this might have even been pre-AB InBev. But at an annual event, their recommendation for what do we do about declining sales of Budweiser and Bud Light was, let's get into weed. Let's get into legal weed, because Budweiser and Bud Light are going to continue to decline, and it's kind of inevitable. And it was really very good advice. They responded to it by firing that person. And, Budweiser and Bud Light sales have continued to decline.
The thing with cannabis is interesting because you don't want to get in too early, or you're going to just be spending money and not getting back on the return on the investment yet. But to think that the be-all, end-all is Bud Light and that the innovation for that company's done forever is a fool's game.
Right.
It's a shame how innovation is, so much of it has to do with timing. You might be able to see the future, but that doesn't mean the church isn't going to cut your head off for telling everybody that you revolve around the sun.
Correct. And I do think that the age of light beer may be coming to an end. I mean, I have this conversation about seltzer all the time. I went through a spate of time where people were calling me up, emailing me to interview me and get my opinion about seltzers. The great drink of Gen Z, and how Gen Z has revolutionized the alcoholic beverage industry with seltzers. And nobody ever liked what I had to say, which was, shut up and get over yourself. We had wine coolers, we had Zima. The idea of a drink for people who don't really like the taste of alcoholic beverages, it's been around for a long time. But I don't know, I will say that maybe there is something to seltzers in regard to eating into light beer sales. Because light beer is really the drink for people that don't like the taste of beer.
That is exactly what it is.
And seltzer does that better.
Yeah, seltzer. You can pick your flavor with seltzer. With Bud Light, it's just Bud Light. With light beer, granted, some taste better than others. Like, I'm
Less
not
bad than others.
Yes.
Correct.
There's a certain one out in the Mountain West that I don't care for, but there's one that's brewed up in, Wisconsin that I will drink a lot of.
Yeah.
But, they're all relatively in the same boat. With the seltzers, like you said, do you want mango? Do you want dragon fruit? Do you want blueberry? Do you want raspberry? You can pick any flavor you want. And that flavor doesn't have to be beer flavor.
You don't have to grow your palate. It can taste like whatever you liked your cereal
like
to taste
sour
like
candy?
when you were 8 years old.
Yep.
And there you have it.
Which, if that's what you want, great. Because there's always going to be that consumer. There's always going to be the person who wants the sweet stuff, the stuff you don't have to think about, the stuff that doesn't necessarily taste good or expand your palate. And that's okay. Speaking of expanding...
It's not okay, but whatever. It's going to happen. I mean, there's no reason to deny it.
Yeah.
But craft beer, everything's fine. If I'm not going to get hired as the CEO of BrewDog, that job of president of Brewers Association, I just like to toss my hat out for that one too.
Oh, he makes like $375,000 a year too.
I will do it for $250.
Can you imagine the guy who supports and leads the charge, supposedly, for craft brewers, where most craft brewers make, maybe if they're lucky as a brewery owner, $40,000 a year. He's paying himself $375,000 a year. Yeah, he can go to hell. The World Beer Cup just happened.
Give Brett his dues back.
Please. The World Beer with interest. The World Beer Cup just happened.
Yeah.
And that
what the hell's that?
It's the world's largest professional beer competition.
Okay.
Where you openly don't take bribes anymore, but behind the scenes we all know it's happening.
Sure.
It's where we go and chronically enter our beers and get told that they don't taste enough like beer to win anything. So I don't enter very often. However, what really pisses me off with these, because I think they're important and I think they matter, because it shows a brewer, hey, you're doing the right thing, you're brewing with technical skill, and you're in the top of your class in the whole world. What really makes me mad, though, is that when you have a beer, like local beer Cheetah by Rheingeist, which is being sold as a lager, wins a gold medal as a cream ale.
What?
Which is not a lager. So either they lied to the World Beer Cup and submitted a lager as a cream ale, which to me should disqualify it, or they're lying to you as a customer because they want to sell on the backs of a lager but have turn times and the cheapness of a cream ale.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of shit that really pisses me off with this. with this competition?
I've heard those complaints come from other brewers. You know, one of my favorite brewers in town is West Side. We talk about it. There's a guy over there named Colin Foy, who is an exceptionally good brewer, and he makes the best double IPA I've ever tasted in my life.
It is quite delicious.
And he enters it into this competition all the time. It never wins anything, and the critique is always that it doesn't taste strong enough. You know, that it doesn't taste hot enough. You're not tasting the alcohol in it. It's not dank enough. It's just too drinkable.
Yeah, it's balanced.
And it is dangerous because it's really easy.
It is like 9.5%. It's great.
Drink a bunch of those beers, and it's a really high ABV beer. But you know, his decision was to start to introduce that double IPA into the IPA category to win things because the beer was such an exceptionally well balanced, delicious double IPA that they hold that against him, and that's just asinine.
Well, and that dovetails off the other issue with this competition and beer competitions in general is that people will brew for the competition. And I don't mean brewing a fresh batch and making sure they time it out right. That's just common sense. But they'll brew the same beer that they're selling and then they'll double hop it. Or they'll add more of this or more of that. Or they'll boost the alcohol just a little bit to
Even
send
under
that
the
for the
same
competition.
name?
Even under the same
And
name.
that's legitimate? You can do that?
You can do that, and I know a brewer's doing it. I'm not going to say any of that on air because I feel like that's a little even more slanderous than something like what Cheetah did. But that absolutely happens for a fact. So that's another thing that hurts someone like Colin and his double IPA is he brews a legitimately delicious, balanced double IPA, enters it in the double IPA category, but really what's happening is that other brewers are making triple IPAs, but entering them as doubles. So his doesn't stand out as much because, well, it doesn't.
He's like the one athlete that's not on roids.
Yeah. It's frustrating and difficult, but and the worst part is these awards don't actually sell more beer. It's proven that they don't sell more beer. They might get you conversations with distributors, who might help you to sell more beer, but the end consumer generally doesn't care about medals unless you're putting it all over your label or you make a whole brand about it like PBR. Which may or may not even want a medal in the first place.
They won a medal in like 1870 something, and they're still crowing about it. Yeah, if like the last time you did something really great was the 1870s, get over yourself, man. I mean, I think you should innovate between then and now, but whatever.
That's it. We've peaked. We're done.
Yeah,
we're gonna coast on this for 200 years.
Do you remember that one time when we were like a really good beer? Adam remembers. He was around the 1870s.
There's a couple fun beer releases coming out, and I use both those words very loosely.
Okay.
Being fun and beer.
Yeah.
First, Twisted Tea. We all know and love Twisted Tea.
Sure.
Legally, it is beer.
Yeah.
They're coming out with a rocket pop flavor, which I know you're very excited about.
I'm so... I can't sit here much longer. I need to get to the store.
In addition, Well-Works Brewing Company, which is a very well-known hype brewery out in the west of here at least, they are releasing their own hard tea. And the point of me bringing both these up is that hard tea is going to be having a moment this summer. You're going to be seeing a lot more hard teas wherever you look. Because Twisted Tea is crushing it for Boston beer right now. It's one of the only bright spots, and other breweries are searching for that same bright spot.
It's really huge in the South, right?
Yes,
Where
and with NASCAR fans.
Where sweet tea is a very big thing.
Twisted Tea is like one of NASCAR's best-selling beverages, surprisingly. Or not surprisingly. I don't know. Twisted Tea is great. I love it. I'll crush some Twisted Teas. There's no other point to that story other than that's it. Fibonacci here in Cincinnati is making national news because they're brewing a first-of-its-kind chestnut beer. So they're only using chestnut flour.
As opposed to malt.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's pretty cool. And chestnut's gluten-free, and it can be used for a lot of other health things, and it's got a great flavor, mildly nutty. It's fun. Anyway.
It is called a chestnut.
That's I thought that was just a separate term for nipples.
It is that as well, but hopefully that's not what they're using.
There's no point to this other headline, but Molson Coors is opening up a new headquarters in Chicago. They're relocating.
Where are they now?
Milwaukee? So, Chicago.
Do they have... So, yeah. Coors isn't even in Colorado anymore, from a headquarters standpoint.
No, they still have their Golden facility, but their headquarters is no longer there. Okay, moving on. Here's a fun one. Baltimore County is offering up $500,000 to a brewery that will promise to continue to brew Guinness Blonde Ale in Baltimore County. Because Guinness announced they're closing down that facility. They spent $90 million to open up the Baltimore location, which was the first time since the 1950s that they tried to open up a brewery in the United States. It didn't work out. They're shutting it down. They never even brewed Guinness there. It was supposed to be an innovation hub and tourist destination for them. And I guess maybe because the fact it was in Baltimore, it didn't actually pull that many people. Smart from a port standpoint, from importing from Ireland, but it just didn't work out well for them. So they're shutting it down, but Baltimore County apparently has been drinking a lot of Guinness Baltimore Blonde, surprisingly enough, because it's not my favorite beverage, but it's cool that the city was like, or the county is so committed to this that they're willing to spend $500,000 on a brewery upgrading its infrastructure to keep brewing Guinness Baltimore Blonde.
Why would they not at least brew another? I mean, first of all, doesn't Guinness have to agree to that? And if the county has control over the facility, why wouldn't the county encourage bringing back whatever the hell they used to brew in Baltimore? A regional beer, like an independently owned regional beer.
I don't know. It's being pushed under the guise of jobs. Let's keep these jobs in Baltimore County. Here's $500,000 investment for your Baltimore County brewery so you can brew Guinness Blonde and keep some Guinness people on staff still. And I think that's the whole pitch. But yeah, there's plenty of regional beers from Baltimore. There's plenty of craft breweries that have been in Baltimore longer than the Guinness facility. Yeah. So why are you sucking up to Guinness in this way? I don't get it. I don't know. It's just a weird thing. It's a weird way to spend $500,000 on a private company.
I don't know. I mean, I was a big fan of The Wire, and it seems like Baltimore's run very well from that show. So,
yeah, I can only imagine who's going to get that $500,000 and how much of it's going to go back to the mayor.
Omar coming.
Okay, on to our non-alcoholic story of the week. You may or may not have heard George Santos has been arrested by the feds for fraud, money laundering, among other things related to financial troubles.
Absolutely unacceptable. A really good, honest representative like that.
And funnily enough, he just had a vote on employer fraud after he just committed employer fraud.
He's accused of a variety of things and defrauding the government in several ways, like two opposite ways. One is that during COVID, he claimed that he was unemployed when he was making like $130,000 a year, actually, so that he could get unemployment benefits. And then he overstated what he was making to appeal to his voter base there in this very affluent district that he got elected to in New York. But my favorite thing about the George Santos story is that the part of the money that he stole, allegedly, he used to buy a bunch of expensive clothing. And anybody that has seen George Santos ever, he's always wearing these stupid ass sweater vests. And he looks like a douchebag 100% of the time. And regardless of your political affiliation, we should all be able to agree that whatever George Santos spent on those stupid fucking sweater vests was a crime in and of itself. It shouldn't happen. And he's a cultural criminal. You're fine to not take fashion advice from me, clearly. But
yeah, look what we're wearing.
Sweater vest and bow tie. If you think you look good in it, you don't. Nobody ever has. They always look like a douchebag 100% of the time. George Santos, good luck to you, buddy. Keep representing the people. Fighting the fight.
Well, you ready for another round?
Yeah, I'm out of beer. So it's time to wrap. If you don't hate us, you should check out Bruce Guy's Happy Hour podcast, where we do the history of craft beer. And in that one, we actually spend a lot more time doing research, and we interview the heavy hitters, the people that have really made and built the industry. So check us out at bruceguys.beer and or anywhere you find podcasts. Cheers, buddy.